If everything is conserved in the way it is today, half of this population, let's say 1.3 billion people, are expected to want to move to Europe. And the population of Europe are expected to be conserved at their 0.7 billion. So 1.3 billion to 0.7 billion Europeans, it means that almost two, the migration balance will be almost 2, which means that if we are here 20 people Europeans, we have to expect 40 more people from Africa to be in this same room. This is a natural process. This is expectation, and if we do not manage the process, we shall not know who will be these 40 more people who will be together with us. So that's why we suggest we cannot stop migration, because migration is natural. It is absolutely natural process. And if we want to put it in one word, this is the wish of the people to find better life. This is a very natural inclination, and we cannot deprive anyone of such wish. So everybody wants to live in a better place. So let's try to see how we can, if we cannot stop migration, let us see how we can manage the migration. This is a different story. The first thing is to, I'm taking for example Africa, but we can easily extrapolate to other continents as well. The first thing is to try to reduce the push factors in Africa. This means to make Africa a much better place to live in. And the United Nations have the so-called 17 sustainable goals, which originally were voted in 2000, then reviewed and revised in 2015. There are 17, and this is fight with famine, with poverty, with diseases, with equality of gender, with lack of education, etc., etc., etc. 17 excellent sustainable goals. So if the world is united around these goals, it certainly will make Africa a much better place to live, and will reduce the push factors. But never mind how much we reduce the push factors, there will be people who want to come to Europe. And let's see what happens. These people who want to come to Europe, they will need, first of all, to have, so to say, an adaptation mechanism built somewhere in Africa or around the Mediterranean Sea. What means adaptation policy? This means that big factories like Mercedes, BMW, Nestle, etc., 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 could be easily urged, encouraged to export part of their production in Africa. Everybody, this is a win-win-win situation, because this will help the workers at these factories to be to get acquainted with the European culture, to get acquainted with the European habits, to realize that the people, that men and women in Europe use the same swimming pool without being frustrated from that. And this will also prepare the people to work in European conditions. As soon as we have this adaptation process, we shall have to expect the people, some people may decide to stay and work for BMW in Algeria, for example, but some of them will be still interested to move to Europe. Whenever they come, the first thing that we shall need to do is to make selection. We cannot say everybody is invited. You know the policy of many countries who have excellent know-how in managing migration. They have good practices in delivering green cards or whatever else they call it. There are such practices in Canada, in the United States, in Australia, in a number of other countries, New Zealand. And so we in Europe will have to select the best practices from the existing practices and make our own selection. For example, I can tell you from my perspective, we in Bulgaria have educated in the past thousands of Arabic students from Syria, from Egypt, Jordan, Palestine, you name it. And these are students who are educators, architects, dentists, whatever. They speak perfect Bulgarian, of course, because they studied here. And they're ready to come back to Bulgaria and to reintegrate themselves. And when I delivered this message on the national television, a few days later, I was called by a person that I didn't know. He told me, hello, I'm Dr. Ahmed from Vidin. You're absolutely right. I graduated in Bulgaria. I have Bulgarian doctor's degree, and I have a number of friends of mine who wanted to come to Bulgaria, but because you didn't have a proactive policy of inviting them, they preferred to go to Germany. So, in the same time, maybe there are people who are better suiting to go to Germany who are positioned here in Bulgaria, but we have the so-called quota policies in the European Union, and the quotas is just numbers and nothing else but numbers. As soon as we make the selection, some of the people who are not selected will have to go back to say Africa and start from square one. The same process, and the other people, those who will be admitted to come, who will be invited to immediately come to settle in Europe, they will have to be integrated. They have to be integrated, and integration is much more complex policy, which depends on the people, depends on the country which is inviting them. But we again have excellent practices in integration of people, and I would quote here the phenomenal experience of Switzerland. Switzerland is a country which is proactively inviting migrants for many, many years now, because they understood that they need fresh genes, so to say, because the Swiss population is not expanding as such, and they saw the big resource for expansion of and growth of the population in the migration. That's why the Swiss invented the practice of smart migration. So if we have it in one country, it means that we can have it in many more countries, and this is the integration process. And finally, at the end of the day, somewhere along this strategy, we shall need to reinforce our security, our border security, our movement security. You see that the attacks which are happening almost daily these days will require indeed new set of measures of security. And so this is just as a symbol. This small wall which is put here is an element of the security, but I would immediately underline that the wall is not a magic solution to migration. The wall cannot stop anything, because if you have 1 billion people from Africa who want to come to Europe, there is no wall which is high enough in order to stop them. Because 1 billion, this is huge, huge amount of people. So the question you will ask me, of course, where will the money come from your program, for your project, for your idea? This is not my idea personal, of course. This is something that we were elaborating in the Atlantic Club for and our laboratory for maybe 2 years now. And the money is there. The good news is that the money is there. For the period 2014-2020, the European Union is allocating 150 plus billion US dollars, and in the same time, the United States is allocating and spending 200 and almost 50. So this means that we have here the total of $400 billion. $400 billion is huge amount of money, and this is sufficient to meet the needs of such a process of management of migration. Indeed, we have the money, but you will ask me, what do we do with this money? We do not invest this money as if we have one strategy. Why? Because the UK is trying to allocate this money to go to the Commonwealth countries. France is very much interested to support the Francophone nations. Spain is pushing for Latin America. So we're not pushing for policies, we're pushing for interests. And these interests are mediocre interests. They are short-term, narrow-minded interests. This is not the long-term interest of Europe. So we're doing something like this. This guy has the excellent tool under himself. He has a pile of letters, but just because he's using the letters as a pile, he does not have the necessary tool to look over the wall. Unity makes the force, and this is what our strategy is about. It is about unity behind a strategy. This is, I wanted to show you once again the different groups of people who are migrating over Bulgaria. Because in the first two slides I showed you a compact mass of people moving around the globe. Here we have the different process. This is the people who were moving and passing over the current land of Bulgaria. Starting from today, in 1949 we had a number of Greeks. Before that, after the revolution in Russia, we had the Russian White Movement. 1915 to 23 we had hundreds of thousands of Armenians coming to Bulgaria after the slaughters in the Ottoman Empire. We have Jews who arrived to Bulgaria after the 15th century. In the 14th century, we have the Turks. Before that, the 13th, we have Cumans and Mongols, Magyars, Slavs, Avars, Bulgars or Bulgarians. 4th to 6th century AD, Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Huns, and Gepids. Before that, Romans, Celts, Persians, Ionians, Ionians, and Dorians. Before that, we have Thracians, Neolithic cultures, Varna gold treasure, 5,000 centuries BC, etc., etc., etc. And a very recent discovery by the director of the National Natural History Museum is that if you see this person, which is like a chimpanzee, 7 million years before the Christ, this is the so-called Grecopithec, was discovered, remnants of this creature were discovered around Bulgaria. Actually, one tooth was discovered here, and one tooth was discovered in Greece. So, starting from the chimpanzee and going to me, we had huge migration of people over this Holy Land. Back to the beginning. Is the human migration miracle? No, it is not a miracle. Do you know who is this man? Yes, yes. And the migration continues with Elon Musk going beyond the planet. He wants to take us to Mars. He's the guy who is bringing us to Mars. He is not interested even in the moon because it's something very near. So we have to be ready for such new journey of the people, of our genes. I don't know how many of the Martians will have the genes of Genghis Khan, but let us see. The future is ahead of us. And these are the sources. If you're interested which slide is coming from which source, we have it here. Most welcome. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Passy Solomon. This is my favorite social network because it is very short. It is only 140 symbols, and I think that 140 symbols are enough to say anything which is important in a way that everybody understands it. Thank you.
So, any questions?
1, 2, 3.
Okay, thank you. You talked about Africa. I was going to ask when I saw the topic migration. It's my latest paper. I haven't finished yet. Haven't worked on it for some time. I still do. I would like to ask you, Ethiopia, Nigeria, mostly even Sudan, the population is supposed to be by 2050 is going to be more than 100 million in Ethiopia and 100 million in Nigeria. How do you think that the European Union is going to face such mass population migrations, even, since the Syrian crisis, the refugee crisis, proved to test the European integrity so much? I mean, we're talking about millions of people that will try to cross not walls, not land, but water. And in Greece, we had this example. We had to use NATO ships to actually patrol the Aegean. How do you think that the European Union is going to face such a threat in long term, not short term? I mean, in the next 20, 30 years.
Relatively easy if following this strategy. Ivan?
Yeah, thank you. I very much enjoyed your presentation and the part with the stairs, on the pile of stairs. And I would like you to extend a bit. My question is how to achieve the unity in order to implement the tools necessary to complete the migration strategy, which we actually talked about.
Well, we have to act the European Union has to act as one country. This is the secret. If we act as one country, we shall succeed. If we act as 27 countries, we shall fail. It is relatively simple.
Thank you, Dr. Passy, for your presentation. Before I ask my question, I would like to treat myself to an observation, with your permission, that it was Attila the Hun who broke into Rome and aided to bring down the Roman Empire, and the Genghis Khan's forces reached Europe and established the Golden Fort, which was a state for about a century and caused some uprising in the East. Now, however, my question is, apparently migration is a process, is a constant process. It doesn't stop. We started taking it more into the spotlight after the migration crisis when their numbers increased. That's right now it's slowing down, but it's still not going to stop. My question would be, because you said that Europe should act as one country. Now, how is it supposed to work that out? Because one of the risks pertaining to migration crisis is radicalization. And for example, the majority of terrorist attacks that were carried out throughout Europe, France, the UK, Belgium, were from people who were second, third, well, some first generations, but they were citizens of those countries. Now, and most of this was addressed on a state level. Should there be more leadership from Brussels, but don't you think that that would backfire with more populist rhetoric from nationalistic parties, which already have rather broad support?
Populism, radicalization, migration are closely linked, but none of them is responsible for the other two. Indeed, there is a link, and we have to be very careful on that. That's why, on purpose, I was speaking only on migration. I didn't speak about radicalization. I didn't speak even about demography, which is one of the biggest problems of Europe and of Bulgaria in particular. This is a huge problem, and migration, like it or not, is a remedy for the demographic crisis which we have. But the radicalization needs a separate approach. And this, by the way, I very much recommend the speech of Theresa May last night. She outlines four very interesting topics. She clearly says that the glue between all terrorist attacks is Islamic fundamentalism. This is something that she says open in public, and this is something that President Barack Obama never said while 8 years in office. And
No?
you, no. They need to restart it.
She needs two. There you go.
Okay. This is one thing, and this, she says the Islamic fundamentalism, and you will have the chance to talk today to two of the most experienced Bulgarian ambassadors we have ever had there now in this hall. This is Ambassador Benisheva, who was our European director for a number of years, and then ambassador to Ireland and Hungary, and Ambassador Elena Poptodorova, who was 2 terms ambassador in Washington, and actually she worked with 3 American presidents in succession. So they will tell you more about what the Europeans and what the Americans think, but what I think that we have to do from our European perspective is really to put under much harder, much stricter control the behavior on the social networks. And this cannot be done with the efforts of governments alone. We need the cooperation with Google, with Facebook, with Twitter, with everybody else involved, because we have the dilemma between privacy and security, and we have invested too many years, too much in privacy and too little in security. So it is time to reverse this, to restore the balance. There are different countries in Europe. Robert said about our achievement from last week. 6 years ago, our team proposed to the European Commission to secure free access to Wi-Fi. What it means, free access? It is not free in terms of not paying for it, but it is free in the same way in which you have this for free. You come here, you switch on the lamp and it works. You go there to the toilet, you flush the water and it works. So you have universal access to communal services like water, electricity, lift and whatever else is necessary. And after this initiative, which was approved by the European Union on the 29th of May, a week ago, even less than that, we are supposed to have, after implementation of this policy, also the similar access to internet and to Wi-Fi. But having said that, we need, people ask me, well, how are you going to guarantee the security in this environment? The security is something very interesting. In the 19th century, there was a huge train robbery in the United States, which was the biggest criminal act of all times at that time. Maybe since then we have much bigger. But the Americans had 2 opportunities, 2 choices. Either to decide to say that the trains are very risky thing and to stop using the trains, or to make the trains more secure places and leave the people using the trains in a secure environment. Obviously, they chose the second option, and we have the same dilemma when using whatever new invention, new technology, never mind internet or something else. We have to find the solutions in order to make the environment secure, and this is not impossible. This is not impossible because we have the big data, and we are lucky. We are very lucky because the big players like Facebook, Google, Twitter, they're predictable. They're not states, they're not governments, but they're extremely predictable and reliable partners. They're not the Islamic State, they're not Al-Qaeda, they're not the guys from whom we don't know what to expect. So, I'm optimist that with the support of the technologists, we shall find the solution, but we need, of course, hard solutions to implement. For example, one of the solutions which has been long debated and not implemented in Europe so far is the so-called full body scanner on the airport. You go through it and you are like naked, practically like naked, and the operator of the scanner can practically see your body as if you're on a X-ray examination. And after long debates in Europe, the Europeans said, no, we don't want this, we want our privacy, we don't know to feel like we're naked on the beach, and we don't use this. Okay, you're not like naked on the beach, but you have to take the results of the attacks. And this is one thing which I very much believe that will become part of our everyday culture, such types of scanners which are not only at the airports, but in the front doors of places where we are supposed to have big masses of people, because you see the terrorists prefer big masses of people. This is their natural target.
So just to speak specifically about Bulgaria, what, first of all, strengths do you think Bulgaria might have, you know, in comparison to other EU countries, other countries across the world, in managing, integrating, and accepting migrants, and also how would you approach the many, you know, the sizable amount of Bulgarians that currently, you know, talking about populism, currently feel suspicious of accepting migrants?
Well, I haven't seen a reliable study, so I cannot say that the people the fears in Bulgaria towards migrants are bigger than the fears elsewhere in Europe. Bulgaria has experience with living with different ethnicities. My hometown is Plovdiv, and this is the second biggest city of Bulgaria, on the middle of the way between here and Sofia. And when Bulgaria got its independence from the Ottoman Empire, the Bulgarians in Plovdiv were minority. Only 40% of the population was Bulgarian, and 60% were Turks, Armenians, Jews, Romanians, Serbs, whatever else, Greeks. So we are used to this, and we have this culture of living peacefully with each other. Or even here in Smolyan, I was grown up next to the mosque, where the Muslim, these are the Bulgarian Muslims, not Turks, these are Bulgarian converted into Islam, the so-called Pomaks, and the Christian group were living peacefully together without any problem whatever. So we have the tradition, and we just have to follow up on this tradition and build it over. And of course, follow the strategy. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.